Hello, my friends. Let me tell you a story about family, money, and what happens when favoritism cuts too deep. I always believe parents should treat their children fairly, not equally in every detail, but fairly, with love and respect. But one day I learned just how wrong I was. At a family gathering, my brother was handed a check for $50,000 to support his business. And me? I was given a coffee mug. It broke something inside me, but I didn't stay silent. I found my own way to get even. Stay with me, this one will surprise you. Growing up, I always knew my parents had a soft spot for my brother David. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. If he scraped a knee, it was a family emergency. If I got an A on a test, it was expected. Barely worth a nod. Still, I told myself favoritism was just a childhood thing. That once we were adults, they'd see us both as equals. After all, I worked hard. I built a steady career, managed my home, and raised my children with pride. David, on the other hand, bounced from one idea to another, half-finished projects, failed ventures, and grand plans that always fizzled. So when my parents invited us over for a special family dinner, I had no reason to expect what was coming. We sat around the table, the smell of roast chicken filling the air, laughter bouncing between walls lined with family photos. After dessert, my father cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have something for you both," he announced. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, handing it to David with a proud smile. David opened it, and I watched his eyes widen. $50,000, he exclaimed. "For my business? You really mean this?" My mother beamed. "We believe in you, honey. This will help you finally get things off the ground." Everyone clapped, David grinning ear to ear. I forced a smile, waiting for my turn. Surely something was coming for me, too. My mother reached into a bag beside her chair and handed me a small, wrapped box. I peeled back the paper to reveal a coffee mug, white porcelain with the words "World's Best Daughter" printed in fading gold letters. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. $50,000 for him, and a coffee mug for me. But no one laughed. They all just watched me, expecting me to gush with gratitude. I managed a tight smile. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. Inside, though, my heart sank. Years of effort, of loyalty, of proving myself. And this was my worth? A mug? I excused myself early that night, clutching the mug like it was proof of my invisibility. On the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. The pride in David's eyes, the applause, the smug look he gave me as if to say, "See, I'm the one they believe in." By the time I pulled it into my driveway, my sadness had hardened into something else. Determination. If they thought I was worth a mug, while he was worth 50,000, then it was time to show them just how wrong they were. And I would do it in a way none of them could forget. The morning after that dinner, I stood in my kitchen holding the mug. "World's Best Daughter." The words mocked me as I poured in coffee. The handle felt cheap, the glaze already chipped near the rim. I stared at it, thinking of the envelope of money my brother had stuffed into his pocket. $50,000. A new start for his business. A safety net. A vote of confidence. And me? A mug. The unfairness cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I wasn't greedy. I didn't need handouts. But what I wanted, what I had always wanted, was recognition. To be seen. To be valued the way he was. Instead, once again, I had been brushed aside like background scenery. Over the next few days, I tried to focus on my life, my work, my children, my quiet routines. But everywhere I turned, the memory resurfaced. At the grocery store, when I debated over spending a few extra dollars. At the gas station, when I watched the numbers climb higher than I liked. Meanwhile, David was probably out shopping for equipment, making plans, fueled by the gift he'd been handed so effortlessly. I could feel resentment growing inside me like a shadow, but alongside it, something else stirred. A determination. Hadn't felt in years. If my parents couldn't see my worth, I would show them. If they believed David was the only one capable of success, I would prove them wrong. I started by looking inward. I thought about my skills, my passions, the things I had built with my own two hands. I didn't need their money to create something meaningful. What I needed was focus, and maybe a little fire in my belly. Late one night, as I sat at the kitchen table sketching ideas on a notepad, I felt the bitterness transform into resolve. I wasn't going to beg for fairness. I wasn't going to demand they split things evenly. No, I would rise above it, and when I did, they would have no choice but to notice. Still, the sting lingered each time I saw David's posts online, photos of his new venture, the tools and inventory he boasted about. I clenched my fists. He never once mentioned the help he received, never once acknowledged that without our parents' generosity, he wouldn't have gotten this far. But that was fine. Let him boast. let him believe he was untouchable. Because quietly, steadily, I was preparing my own surprise. And when the time came, my success would speak louder than any coffee mug ever could. I knew I couldn't match David dollar for dollar. He had $50,000 in his pocket, a safety cushion that let him take risks without fear. But what I had was something different. Grit. Years of managing a household on a budget, of stretching every dollar, of working twice as hard to get half as much. That kind of discipline doesn't show up on a balance sheet, but it matters. I started small. I'd always loved baking, pies, cakes, cookies that people raved about at church gatherings and school fundraisers. So one evening, I placed a few photos of my baked goods online just to see if anyone might be interested. To my surprise, orders trickled in almost immediately, a dozen cookies here, a pie there. Nothing huge, but enough to give me a spark of hope. Encouraged, I decided to take it further. I set aside a little savings and invested in better ingredients, sturdier packaging, and a simple logo I sketched myself. Within weeks, my little kitchen was bustling. Friends recommended me to their friends. Coworkers placed orders for office parties. Neighbors asked me to cater birthdays. Every time I slid a box of baked goods across my counter, I felt a surge of pride. Not because of the money, though that helped, but because it was mine. Built from my hands, my recipes, my late nights of flour dust and sugar crystals. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on David's progress. He had rented a storefront for his business, boasting about it at every family gathering. "Big things are coming," he'd say, flashing that confident grin. But behind the smile, I noticed cracks. Bills piling up, suppliers complaining, his energy stretched thin. I didn't gloat. Not yet. I just kept working quietly, steadily, letting my little bakery business grow. By the end of the first year, I had a loyal customer base, a tidy profit, and more importantly, independence. Word began to spread beyond my circle. A local newspaper ran a short feature on the mom with the homemade pies that taste like childhood. Orders doubled. Soon I had to rent space in a community kitchen just to keep up. And all the while I thought about that mug. Sitting in my cupboard, chipped and faded, a reminder of how small they once made me feel. Each time I baked another batch, each time I delivered another order, I told myself, this is worth more than their check, this is my proof. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not exactly. It was about reclaiming what had been denied to me. Respect. Recognition. A voice at the table. And deep down, I knew the day was coming when David and my parents would see it too. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly the cracks in David's business became too large to ignore. At first it was whispers. An order delivered late, a supplier unpaid, a customer complaint brushed aside. Then it was louder. Angry reviews online, calls that went unanswered, rent piling up on that storefront he was so proud of. I heard about it not from him, but from neighbors, mutual friends, even the local news that once praised his ambitious startup. They ran a story about small businesses closing, and there he was, mentioned by name. His shop shuttered. Meanwhile, my own little venture had blossomed beyond anything I'd imagined. What began as a few cookie orders had turned into a steady business. Weddings, anniversaries, corporate events. People wanted my baking. They didn't just buy food, they bought the love, care, and tradition that came with it. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had $50,000 to launch big, and he failed. I had a chipped coffee mug and a handful of recipes, and I thrived. At family gatherings, the shift was impossible to ignore. My parents still tried to prop him up, asking how his next idea was coming along, but their voices carried unease. When they turned to me, they couldn't help but notice the praise others gave me. Cousins raved about my pies. Uncles asked if I could ship cookies to their offices. Even my parents' friends whispered to them about how proud they must be. One evening, we sat around the same table where it all began. My mother passed me a dish and said softly, "Your father and I tried your apple tart last week. It was incredible." I smiled politely, but inside, I thought, a tart bought more respect than a mug ever did. David, sitting across from me, avoided my gaze. His shoulders hunched, his once boastful voice muted. He mumbled something about bad timing and unlucky breaks, but the room didn't rush to comfort him the way it once did. For years, I had been invisible. For years, they had showered him with faith and left me with scraps. But now, my success shone too brightly to be dismissed. And I'll admit, it felt good. Not because I wanted him to fail, but because for once, they all saw me. After dinner, as I helped clear the table, my father pulled me aside. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "We may not have given you much back then, but we see now what you've done. You didn't need $50,000 to prove yourself. You've built something real, something lasting." His words, though late, landed like balm on an old wound. But as I nodded, A thought burned in the back of my mind. I didn't just build this for me. I built it as proof. Proof that their favoritism couldn't define my worth. And soon, I'd find the perfect way to show them exactly what that proof looked like. The opportunity came the following Christmas. The same living room, the same tree twinkling in the corner, the same tradition of exchanging gifts after dinner. For years, those moments had been marked by inequality. David with his envelopes of support, me with trinkets like scarves, candles, or that infamous coffee mug. But this time I came prepared. I arrived with two neatly wrapped boxes. One was large, heavy, tied with gold ribbon. The other was small, plain, with simple wrapping. I placed them carefully under the tree and sat back, waiting. When it came time to open gifts, David reached for the larger one. My parents watched with curiosity as he tore through the wrapping to reveal a coffee mug. White porcelain. Plain. On it, I had printed the words, "World's Best Entrepreneur." The room went quiet. David blinked, his cheeks reddening as he realized what it meant. A mirror of my own humiliation, but this time turned toward him. "Cute," he muttered, forcing a laugh. But his eyes betrayed the sting. Then I handed the second, smaller box to my parents. They unwrapped it carefully, and inside was a thick envelope. My father pulled it open, and his jaw dropped. Inside was a check not for $50,000, but for $100,000. My own money, earned from my bakery. "I wanted you to see," I said calmly, my voice steady. "You once gave David $50,000 because you believed in him. You gave me a mug because you didn't, but I didn't forget. I worked. I built. And now I can give back double. Not because I had help, but because I made it happen on my own." The silence in that room was deafening. My mother's eyes welled with tears. My father's hands shook as he held the check. Even David couldn't speak. I continued, my tone softer now. "I don't need your money. I never did. What I needed was your faith. And when I didn't have it, I found faith in myself. This isn't about revenge. It's about respect. About showing you that I was always capable, even when you didn't see it." For a long moment, no one moved. Then my father cleared his throat, his voice breaking. "We were wrong," he said simply. "We should have believed in you. We should have treated you fairly. And we're proud of you. More than words can say." Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them back. I had waited years for that acknowledgement, and now it was finally here. As the evening wound down, the mug sat awkwardly on the table between David and me, a reminder of the past, but also a symbol of how far I had come. I didn't need their favoritism anymore. I didn't need their approval. I had built my worth with my own two hands, but still it felt good to know that at last they saw me, and they would never forget it. In the end, it was never just about money. It was about value, respect, and the way families sometimes fail to see the quiet strength right in front of them. They gave my brother $50,000 and handed me a coffee mug. But instead of letting it define me, I turned that slight into fuel. I built something real, something lasting, with my own two hands. And when the time came, I showed them, not with anger, but with proof, that I was never the lesser child. Sometimes the sweetest victory isn't revenge, it's success that speaks for itself. So if you've ever been underestimated, remember this: your worth isn't in what you're given, it's in what you create. If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe for more.